We would have loved to welcome you in Lebanon at the university, but I don't know, hopefully anytime soon we will be able to welcome you here. So again, thank you so much for your time and for your cooperation. We really appreciate it, as this subject, especially trauma, is very important to the Lebanese people. So thank you again. I will leave it to you now for the session, and we will keep the questions until the end if anyone would like to learn more about any insight that you have provided us with.
Sure. Well, thank you very much for your invitation. It's such a great honor to be here with you today, and I hope that one day we will have a chance to be to meet in person in Lebanon. I'm just wondering if you're able to see the presentation. Please let me know.
Yes, we can. We can see it. Yes.
Wonderful. So my name is Bianca Briciu, and I am located in Ottawa. I work at St. Paul University at the Providence School of Transformative Leadership and Spirituality. It's a new school that is now about 6 years old. So I'm going to talk today about trauma and mind-body practices for well-being, and more specifically, I will talk about two different approaches to trauma work. One is called somatic experiencing, and then the other one is called generative somatics. And it's really about how we can integrate more those divisions between mind and body that are actually created by trauma. So I'm going to give you an outline of what the presentation will be about. We will go through a definition of what is trauma, what are the types and effects of trauma, and I hope this presentation will be helpful for understanding the many different nuances of trauma, because now we use it to express many different things and people have different understandings. Then we will talk about one way to define trauma healing as the reconnection of mind and body. I will give you an example of short-term intervention in shock trauma, so a trauma that happens suddenly that makes people go into a shock, and how we can accompany them in those moments immediately after. And I will also talk about two long-term practices for well-being that you can practice at any time and you can integrate them in your life. So I hope that this presentation will be helpful in that sense. So I'll start with the definition of trauma. There are a few different definitions, but I tried to give you a glimpse of a few aspects that I find really important about trauma. Trauma is an injury that results from experiences that overwhelm our emotional coping system. So what happens is that our bodies have their own resilience mechanisms and they can move through difficulty. But when the difficulty is actually greater than our capacity to respond well, then our bodies create a trauma response, which is an adaptation to that difficulty. We are transformed, we are changed by that overwhelming, difficult experience, and that can lead to long-term protection mechanisms. So what is very, I would say, dangerous about trauma is that it doesn't only have an immediate effect, like the post-traumatic stress syndrome that is more well known, but it can influence our whole life. And I always found that so fascinating about trauma work, because trauma work can liberate us from certain patterns that we learned as a result of trauma. Um, Another definition is that trauma is an experience or a series of experiences that break or betray our inherent need for safety, belonging, and dignity. And this definition has the premise that as human beings, we have these three basic needs for safety, belonging, and dignity. And when we are in an environment where one of these needs has been betrayed, then we move into a trauma response. The most well-known definition of trauma is our traumatic stress that comes from what we call the big T trauma, natural disasters, accidents, experiences of violence. But there is also something that is less well known, and it's more systemic and it's more long term, which is what researchers call the small t trauma. Experiences of discrimination, poverty, inequality, lack of basic needs, and toxic prolonged stress. These experiences are also making people move into a trauma response. Oh, I think that my presentation went away. I hope you see it again. Um, so the types of trauma are primary, which means we experience it directly as an individual. Secondary, it means I am together with someone who was injured in an accident, which means that I am there with that person, and I experience it through their experience, through empathy. Then there is vicarious trauma, which is experienced by people who work with those who have been traumatized, like doctors, nurses, psychiatrists, psychologists, first frontline in workers. Intergenerational trauma is trauma that is transmitted from one generation to the next. And there are many studies showing how for example, experiences of war can be transmitted over many generations, even after the war has ended. And then we have the collective trauma, which are experiences of a large collective body, like a nation or an ethnic group. Now, today we will talk more about the individual or the primary, secondary, and a little bit about vicarious trauma, a little bit less about the larger aspects of collective and intergenerational trauma. So you have three different aspects that come together in a trauma response. First, you have an event, something difficult, something stressful, something threatening that we are experiencing. The second aspect is experience. So we experience that our bodies, our psychological system reacts to it in a particular way. And depending on our reactions, we move into certain types of trauma responses. And the third aspect is the effect. So the effect means that now we created a change in how we respond to the world, how we inhabit our body, how we feel, how we think. So there are all these changes that are happening as a result of that difficult interaction between our embodied system and a threatening event. So this book called What Happened to You is a conversation between a psychologist, Bruce Perry, and Oprah Winfrey, talking about how we can change the conversation about trauma from what's wrong with you. So when people have problems of addiction, mental health problems, then that tends to make them react in a certain way to them. And changing the conversation to what happened to you, being curious about the person's stories and what happened to them in the past. So we have two opposing reactions to threat as a rule. The first one is hypervigilance and constant anxiety. So after a stressful event, we can continue to be anxious for a very long time, and sometimes that can become our habit of behavior. The opposite reaction is we can dissociate. So dissociation is when we disconnect from the body. I like how they use the phrase in indigenous understanding that our soul leaves our body when we are under a very powerful stress response. So after that, we tend to not inhabit our life fully and tend to sometimes move into dangerous situations, accept stress more easily because our system is not really our vitality is not really there anymore. Trauma makes people feel unsafe in their bodies and in relationships. So a study shows that 76% of people they interviewed had at least one traumatic event in their life. And this is a study that has been done in Canada. So, what are the trauma reactions and adaptations? Now, we have four different ways of responding to trauma as an embodied system. And I think this framework is familiar to many of you. We have the fight response. We are trying to fight the danger. We move towards the danger. We we become angry, irritated, and aggressive. There can be the flight response when we move into a response of anxiety and fear, avoiding the threat, um, sometimes feeling panic. So, flight is the attempt to run away from the danger or the very difficult situation or the difficult relationship. Freeze is when we don't know what to do and we get stuck. And that leads to a sense of powerlessness, dissociation, depression, shame, spacing out. So, all these responses that can happen when we feel a very intense threat. And as I said, threat doesn't have to be an experience of violence. We can also experience threat when we are marginalized, when we are criticized, when we are not seen, and these what we call milder situations that are not so obvious. And one less known response is the fawn response. And fawn is a word that says sometimes when we are in stressful situations, we give in to others, even if we don't agree with them. We try to please them, we try to placate them, we cannot say no. It's very difficult to set boundaries, and we accept other people's power over us. And this is another trauma adaptation. So, one of the very interesting ways of working with trauma is through the body. And for a very long time, trauma was addressed in, and even nowadays, there are many different approaches to psychotherapy regarding trauma. But what I found particularly interesting was this integration of the body in therapy, because sometimes trauma is I would say, inhabiting our body to such an extent that our stories cannot really unlock it. We can talk about, we can share the story of trauma. That doesn't mean that we will move out of the trauma response. So, learning how to work with the body to engage with that is very helpful. So, somatic experiencing is a method created by Peter Levine, and he wrote a beautiful book called Waking the Tiger, Healing Trauma, where he talks about his experiences integrating the body in therapy. So, the aim of somatic experiencing is to help one access the body memory of the event, not the story. So, that's a very big difference because. For example, another very famous book is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, and I'll share a quote from him very soon. The idea is that trauma responses are stored in the body. They keep our energy trapped in particular ways, either in a fight response, we constantly react in anger to the slightest trigger, or we could be in flight. So we move very quickly into anxiety and worry, or in the other two responses, freeze when we feel powerless, we don't know what to do, or fawn when we lose our dignity and we just give in to other people. So this approach facilitates the completion of self-protective motor responses. Self-protective motor responses are the responses of the body that we normally all have, but that can be dysregulated as a result of trauma, and the release of thwarted survival energy bound in the body and nervous system, thus addressing the root cause of trauma symptoms. And this type of therapy works a lot with sensations and paying attention to the felt sense. It actually takes people from the story of trauma to the sensation in the body, and then tracking that sensation to access the emotion and the memory of a certain event. This type of work is also increasing tolerance for emotions and sensations, because when we are traumatized, we have a very small threshold of tolerance. That's why we get what we use the word triggered. I get triggered, which means I feel these very intense emotions and I react in particular ways. I move away from being fully in the present with open mind, open heart, and open understanding. So, what experiences of trauma show us is that we embody our past in the present, and how we are right now in this moment is the result of our experiences, our adaptations to those experiences, and also the work that we have done to, let's say, heal ourselves, or to move more into wholeness. And I'm quoting from the book I mentioned, The Body Keeps the Score: Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma. Traumatized people chronically feel unsafe inside their bodies. The past is alive in the form of gnawing interior discomfort. Their bodies are constantly bombarded by visceral warning signs, and in an attempt to control these processes, they often become expert at ignoring their gut feelings and numbing awareness of what is played out inside. They learn to hide from their selves. And it's interesting that this work started with research that was done with veterans returning from war and having these very difficult adjustment processes, where they were expressing exactly what you see in this quote. So the research started in the 80s, late 90s with war veterans, and then it expanded to many other fields, because there is a larger recognition that many of our social cultural systems are traumatizing systems. And learning how to work with our bodies and our minds, but also how to address the larger social problems is very important. So the idea here is that when we had experiences of trauma, our vitality is constricted. So we lose a sense of that energy of the body, that openness, that sense of calm and comfort and moving easily through life, right? We tend to feel fear about a lot of things. We tend to feel anger. So we experience more frequent negative emotions compared to positive emotions when we are stuck in trauma response. And what is interesting is that in trauma responses, sometimes even when there is no outside threat, people still feel those intense emotions because their bodies are constantly sending them signals that something is not right, that something is off, and they don't know how to respond to that, which leads to mental health problems. And even there are many studies showing the correlation with certain diseases based on immunity responses that are caused by these trauma adaptation. So I wanted to mention a few cultural traits that perpetuate trauma, because this is important as well. So it's important to maintain awareness of what we can do as individuals, working with therapists, or creating mind-body practices for ourselves in our daily life, but also that critical understanding that some responses that we have, some cultural ideas that we have, may sometimes contribute to the traumatizations of others and even of ourselves. So one aspect is the shaming for the expression of emotions. It's a classic that in many cultures, it's very shameful for men to cry. So when men experience sadness, because of that cultural shaming, they move into okay, they swallow that, let's say, sadness, because it is not allowed to express it in a healthy way. When we are sad, we need to express sadness in particular ways, and when this is forbidden, then we move into a sort of trauma adaptation. We hold it in the body and we express it in different ways. Sometimes it comes out in unexpected ways. We also have fragmented and expensive care for trauma events, right? So we can go to the doctor, but then we need to go to a psychologist, then we need to work with someone else. And people find it very hard to navigate, at least in Canada. I don't know how it is for you in Lebanon, to navigate the healthcare system in order to access proper care after a traumatic event. And sometimes it doesn't have to be after a traumatic event. Like I said, toxic, prolonged stress in difficult relationships leads to these mental health problems and difficulties. A sense of separation of the physical from mental in our system is also a very big problem. The fact that we see physical diseases as completely separate from psychological problems and completely separated from social structures, right? So we have this fragmentation and separation where people can only treat a certain symptom. They cannot address their whole system of mind, body, heart, and soul. The pressure to adjust too quickly after an event, right? When we lose someone, when we had an experience of violence. So all these very difficult traumatic experiences move us into a response. We are very sad, we are very angry or confused, and sometimes there is social pressure that we need to get over it so that we can go back to work and pick it up and just try to be strong. This can also, again, store trauma in the body and make it manifest in different ways. Intrusive questions is another way in which certain systems can replicate and perpetuate trauma. For example, and this is very well known, that people who have experienced sexual violence, when they go to for medical examination, the intrusive questions can sometimes perpetuate a trauma response in their bodies. And then the more general denial and gaslighting. So the denial that some people have that they may have a traumatic impact on others, and the lack of recognition that we all impact one another in the way we treat each other and in the way we talk to one another. So I will move now into mind-body practices, because I would like us to do one practice together as well. Um, and I wanted to mention three of them that I find very useful, and they can be incorporated in your daily life. Um, Increasing our body awareness. And increasing our body awareness means that we pay more attention to the sensations of the body, both inside of our bodies. This may seem a little bit strange to pay attention to sensations inside the body, and to external sensations that come from the environment. You may be familiar, and I think that there were a few talks in this week about mindfulness, which is a practice. Well, it's a way of paying attention to our bodies, to our felt sensations, and we do that through different types of meditation and contemplation practices. Safety and support from other people is very important as well, because the number one factor in increasing resilience is that social connection, the loving, caring connection with another person. So I will try to see if just going to go at this very quickly about one mind-body practice that you can have, which is the Take Five, which is a practice that you can introduce in your daily life. Take five means that um, it's almost like you create these little islands of mindfulness in your busy daily life. And I will go through the steps of what this means, and then I will share a short video with you. The first one is notice a cue. So try to create certain cues. For example, when I'm drinking my tea, or when I go out the door of my house, or when I sit down at my desk. So as you do these gestures, use these gestures as a reminder. Oh, now I want to connect to my body. Now I want to see how I feel. Noticing the new means focus on something that you were not paying attention to a moment ago. For example, focus on the texture of your cup. Focus on the temperature of the tea that you didn't notice. Just focusing your attention on particular things. Noticing your body, noticing your position, how you sit, if you feel tension, if your shoulders are slumped. Notice your breath. Um, Take a deeper breath intentionally. And the take five is related not only to the 5 steps, but also you can do 5 deeper breaths just intentionally. So beginning with one complete breath, noticing the breath, lengthen and deepen it, and then take 5 deeper breaths. So all these gestures are bringing our attention to the present moment, which is a powerful way to stay connected to the body, to the mind, and to the experience, rather than in our heads worrying, being angry, or um, being concerned about a certain story. And noticing the now. This means that you can respond to what is present in your current situations and notice things with a sense of openness and non-judgment. Just notice. You don't have to do anything because um, one of the most precious gifts that we give to ourselves is attention to our bodies and attention to our embodied emotional system. So I will stop sharing. Please bear with me for a second, and I will try to share a short 5-minute video. Um, and I hope that you will be able to hear. Please
Life
let
feels
me know.
particularly busy.
Yes,
There
we
are
can.
Yes, we could.
apps
Oh,
to help you
sorry.
flip the switch and redirect your attention into the present moment. Take 5 is simple and can be done effortlessly. However, is not so easy, and when mastered, can have a powerful effect on your day. Remember, you can take 5 anywhere and at any time. You don't need to close your eyes or necessarily even stop what you are doing. The secret is to integrate Take 5 into whatever you are doing without anybody noticing. The purpose of this recording is to teach you Take 5 so you can guide yourself through the practice as often as you like and in any situation. No need to remember word for word what is said. You can customize your Take 5 to work best for you. The key is to take 5 breaths and to adopt a mindset of non-judgment, openness, and patience. Take 5 is a tool that you can use anytime, especially when life feels particularly busy. There are 5 basic steps to help you redirect your attention and get into the mindful zone. Step 1. Notice the cue. Step 2. Notice something new. Step 3. Notice the body. Step 4. Notice the breath. Step 5. Notice now. Step 1. Notice the cue. Use cues in your environment to remind you to take 5. It might be every time you brush your teeth, take a coffee break, walk through the door to your home, or see a given person. It doesn't matter what the cue is, so long as you notice it. This is your gateway to Take 5. Now you are ready to get back in a mindful zone. Step 1 also cues your intention for Take 5. Take a moment to focus on the outcomes you want to create in your life. Step 2. Notice something new. Respond to your cue by noticing something new about yourself or your environment that you weren't paying attention to before. For example, if you are listening to someone, you may notice something new about the person you are listening to, such as the quality of their voice. On a coffee break, you might tune into the feeling of the cup in your hand or the taste of the drink. Or you might simply refocus your attention into your physical surroundings to notice a new pattern or texture or color on an object around you. Noticing something new can also include a small detail that is going right for you or that you are grateful for today. It doesn't matter what you notice, and you are not trying to make things a certain way, good or bad. The practice is about learning to direct the attention with intention. Step 3. Notice the body. Next, whether you are standing or sitting, bringing your attention to the feet, noticing the contact points your feet are making with the floor or shoes or any other point. Then pressing the feet into the floor and lifting and lengthening up the spine. Feeling the body as a whole while you ground and lift. Step 4. Notice the breath. Now bring the attention to the breath. Begin with one complete breath, feeling the breath moving into the body, feeling the breath moving out of the body. Then deepening and lengthening the breath so the inhalation and the exhalation are each about 5 seconds. Finally, take 5 complete breaths this way. Don't worry if you find your mind wandering. Just gently guide your attention back to the felt sensations of breathing and start again. Step 5. Notice now. Noticing what is present now, in this moment, not trying to change anything, rather observing and allowing things to be as they already are. Responding to now with a sense of openness, non-judgment, and patience. Once your brain is more fully wired into the moment, you have a much better perspective to choose a wise step forward. You can always choose to repeat or extend any of the steps in Take 5. Remember your cue for the day and decide to take 5 every time you notice it. When you take 5, you are creating new pathways in the brain that help the body de-stress, the mind refocus, and optimize your ability to perform. The more you integrate Take 5 into everything you do, the more seamless and beneficial it becomes.
Thank you for uh, bearing with me through the video. I'm going to stop sharing that screen and share again my presentation. So I will talk now about the emotional first aid for shock trauma, which is a series of steps that you can use if you are in the presence of someone who just went through an accident or a shock experience. It's when people go in a shock response, there is the danger of dissociation, which means that their what we call, again, I use the word soul, but please take it as a more of a metaphoric meaning for it. Um, Dissociation means that our psychological system becomes disconnected from the body. It's interesting. You can think of the metaphor of breaking something, you know, when you have different pieces. It's almost something similar when the body remains in one side and then the emotions going to another and the thoughts going to another direction. So stay connected to the person. It's very important to have a person who talks in a soothing, calming way to the person undergoing shock. Um, Strong emotions are okay. People who go through a shock response experience very intense emotions. They may shake, cry, um, they can be very agitated. So just use gentle touch, usually holding hands, and invite the person to speak about their sensations, not about their emotions, not about what they think, but just ask them to pay attention to what they feel in their hands, in their feet, in their, you know, the rest of the body. There may be agitation as the person talks, and it's very important to allow them to talk, to not ask them to shut up, don't scream, don't cry, don't shake. It's very important to let the body move through that response because the body has that innate capacity to shake off the intensity of the stress response. So asking people about peripheral details means that you can ask them when they tell you the story, let's say the next day, instead of letting them move into the very intense emotions created by the shock response, ask them to tell you details about what was around them, just to redirect their attention to the space where something happened rather than the intensity of the story. And the very important aspect is allowing and encouraging bodily reactions and movements. You should not stop the person from expressing whatever it is that they need to express. Just being there and accompanying the person, being a soothing, calming presence is essential in order to help them move more easily through a shock trauma. And I wanted to, before I go to the grounding meditation that I would like us to practice together, I wanted to just mention some of the mind body practices that some of you may practice already, or I hope that you will take up one of these. The mindfulness practice is a really powerful method for bringing us back into the body and reconnecting mind and body in that healing way. And it's interesting, when I was watching the video again, I'm reminded of my own experience when I started mindfulness meditation, and I was practicing it for 3 years, or 4 years on and off. And then one day I started to notice the difference between the story in my head and the actual embodied experience. It was almost like that aha moment when I was noticing that I had a story of stress. Oh, I have this exam to pass and I'm stressed about the future and so on. But the moment to moment embodied experience was actually not threatening, right? I would drink my tea now I will take a bath, now I go for a walk. So the embodied experience tended to be different from the stressful story. So mindfulness helps us slow down through contemplative or meditative practices that could be of many different kinds, doing yoga, dancing, tai chi, martial arts, massage, walking in nature. These are all practices of bringing us back in the body. So now I wanted to share with you another what I found as a groundbreaking approach to healing trauma through mind-body practices is an approach that also brings the social world and the systems and organizations into play in this larger healing and restoration process. Um, Something called generative somatics, created by Staci Haines, who wrote a beautiful book called The Politics of Trauma, where they refer to the soma as this holistic aspect of the mind, body, heart, and the environment around us, right? So it's an understanding that we live as an interdependent system within larger systems, and they connect personal healing with social justice as well. So she has this ideas that we have three fundamental needs, and I mentioned her definition in the beginning of our talk today: safety, belonging, and dignity. And the generative somatics is an approach that engages the body with its emotions, sensations, movements, in order to align actions with values and vision and heal from the impacts of trauma and oppression. They focus a lot on the long-term trauma created by traumatizing systems. So, with your permission, I would like to do a grounding meditation together. I hope that you can, I will just stop sharing my presentation and we will do it together. I hope that you can stand up. It has 4 different dimensions. I will stand up, and you can watch me as I do that. And you're welcome to stand up with me, or if you prefer to not stand up, you can sit down as well. So for the first moment, I want you to connect to your body sensations. Just pay attention to your posture. Take a deeper breath. And if you're standing or even sitting, I invite you to elongate a little bit the spine. So just maybe extend your neck a little bit, straighten your back, straighten your spine. Pay attention to the sensations that you have now in the body. And the first thing that we pay attention to is our weight on the ground, the sensation in your feet, that aspect of grounding. And we can think of ourselves as being here on earth, touching the ground, extending towards the sky, so we take up space. And in this experience of extending your back a little bit, I want you to sense into your dignity as a person. You are here, you matter, you are of value. Your body occupies this particular space between the earth and the sky. We are here. Just leaning into that a little bit and deepening your breath. And now I invite you to pay attention to your back. Pay attention to how straight your back is, the sensations that you may have in your back. And I invite you to bring to mind your parents and have an image of one parent touching one shoulder, another parent touching the other shoulder. Just the parents being there and supporting you. Even if they were not perfect parents, you are here as a result of some of their work and some of their own life process. So just envision your back being gently supported by your parents. And you can bring to mind their own parents and the extension of many different generations that come before you. You can see the many, many people who are in your past and whose line you continue through your life at the present moment. You can take a deeper breath with that image of having people at your back who support you and who were there before you. Some of them are still here. Acknowledging the importance of being supported by others who know better than us sometimes. And now we move into the third dimension, which is the right and left part of the body. So you're welcome to extend your hands a little bit if you would like to. Again, straighten your back, deepen your breath. And I invite you to bring to mind your allies, people you work with, people you love, who are there next to you, doing the things that are important to you. So just be aware of your place in a larger collective body of people who surround you, who are allies with you, people who nurture you, give you a sense of well-being. And stay a little bit with that image and that sensation. Take a deeper breath. And maybe a sense of gratitude for them being there next to you, contributing in a positive way to your life. Take another breath. And now we move into the front of your body. I invite you to pay attention to your face, your legs, the rest of your torso, what is in front of the body, your heart area. And here we focus on what is very important, what is truly valuable to you, and how you would like to carry that forth, to bring it into being, into the work that you do or the life that you have ahead of you. And you can gently say that in your mind. I am committed to whatever it is for you. I am committed to social justice. I'm committed to more compassion. I'm committed to collaboration. Whatever it is that you find important and valuable, just say that gently in your mind and take a deeper breath. Notice the sensations that you have in your body as you do this. Okay. Feel that commitment and value as a direction. It's almost like you have something ahead of you to move towards, a sense of purpose and positionality in the world. So I invite you to take a deep breath, and then you can move your body if you are standing or sitting, and we will return to our conversation. Well, it was just me speaking. It's not really a conversation, it's the presentation. Um, so I will now invite you to ask any questions that you may have, and I'm happy to send you the video link. I see that some of you were asking for that. You're welcome to send me a question in the chat, or maybe to unmute yourself and ask, um, depending on how you feel more comfortable. And I want to thank you all for your participation today. I see that there are many of you. Um, so I hope that you will continue um, using some of these practices. It could be the practice of grounding that you can find if you look for the politics of trauma and the work of Staci Haines, or this one, the mind well, the taking 5 minutes, or any other mindfulness practices that you want to introduce in your life that will create. It's interesting because it not only creates well-being for the present moment, which is, just feeling relaxed and feeling good, but it's also about allowing you to heal some of the tensions that come from your past and from your difficult experiences in the past. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. It was a pleasure and a privilege to be with you here.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for your time, Dr. Bianca. I think we have Josiane. She has raised her hand.
Sure.
I think she has a question. Josiane?
Good night, good evening. No, only I didn't see the video link.
It's at the beginning of the chat. If you wish, Josiane, you can send us an email on wellness. We can share with you for everyone. If you wish to have the recording of the session, we can share it with you and the link. And I have also shared with you in the chat box a feedback survey. If you can take a minute to leave your feedback. And Dr. Bianca, of course, I will share the feedback with you once we receive responses, hopefully by next week. Okay. If no one has a question, I don't know if anyone has a question or would like to add anything. I personally want to thank you for your time and for your availability and for the techniques because I think we all need them and they are feasible. Like we can do them if we are in the office, at home, wherever we are. So they are something reachable that we can do. And I really like the video because it's true. We need to like focus on this and focus on the files. So thank you so much, Dr. Bianca. It was a pleasure having you with us and sharing your expertise with us. And as I said at the beginning of the session, we really hope to meet you one day in person and get to like have a conversation in person, hopefully sometime soon, whether in Lebanon or in Canada. We
For
may
sure.
never know. Thank you
Yes.
again
Thank you,
and
everyone.
have a fruitful day. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Goodbye.